Lapis lazuli. Lapis lazuli? Lapis lazuli. Lapis lazuli. Lapis lazuli lazuli. I never remember how to pronounce this word because I learned it in Italian before I learned it in English. And now I don't remember which way is the English way. Lapis lazuli. Lapis lazuli. Which one now is even the Italian one and the English one? Anyway, what is it? It's this blue material that you see here on the Standard of Ur. What is the Standard of Ur? It's a wooden box that was found inside a royal tomb, a burial, tomb 779 in the Royal Cemetery of Ur in modern day Iraq, and it's dated to 2600 BCE, so it comes from the Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia. Now, in this royal cemetery, there were burials that were filled with objects like this Standard of Ur, objects that are covered in luxurious, expensive materials, including gold and lapis, whatever it's called. And some of these objects have ceremonial purposes. Some of these objects are sort of more domestic. And we surmise that these objects have been buried with important individuals from ancient Mesopotamia so that they can accompany them into the afterlife. We do have some evidence of human sacrifice at these burials. Servants, entertainers, and soldiers were included in these tombs. Also, this might make you think of ancient Egypt. I'm sure you've heard of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, and you know that their servants and other people would have been buried with them inside the pyramids. So let's look at this object, the Standard of Ur from ancient Mesopotamia. This object is in the British Museum in London. These are the kinds of things that maybe I personally would like to see returned to their place of origin. But as we know, the British Museum would be pretty much empty if that were the case. Now, let's take a closer look at this. On one side, we have images of warfare, and on another side, we have images from a time of peace. So this is a standard. What is a standard? This is like something that would be mounted on a pole and paraded during military combat. Or this is sort of a replica of one of those. Perhaps this was not actually used during warfare, but has more ceremonial purpose. I kind of think of this as like people in the military will dress up like in fatigues when they're like at battle, but then if they have like a parade, they have like a fancy dress thing, like a suit with little medals and stuff. So maybe this is like the fancy version of what would have actually been the standard that was used during warfare. It is a rectangular box covered in lapis lazuli, shell, and red limestone. On one side, we see a depiction of images of warfare, and on another side, we see images of a great feast or a period of peace. And we're not exactly sure if this was considered to be one long narrative or if these two sides are meant to be read separately. Now, let's look at the war side. Okay, first of all, what we are seeing are 3 registers. Remember, a register is like an enclosed off area that will separate these scenes from this possible narrative. If we're going to read this as a narrative, we would start down below on the bottom row. You will see that the artist has introduced a ground line. So there is this line upon which the figures stand, creating a real sense of space in which these figures are depicted. And what we see depicted here are soldiers on chariots, and the chariots are being pulled by horses. And this appears to be an example of some Sumerian war tactics. So they are trampling their enemies with the horses and the chariots. You can see the brilliant blue color placed behind the figures. Is that lapis lazuli? Lapis lazuli? Anyway, this is a material that comes from modern day Afghanistan. And remember, we're in modern day Iraq. So this is a great distance. This great distance that had to be traveled to acquire this material means that this material is expensive and valuable because it comes from a faraway place. It's not local to ancient Mesopotamia. We can also see the use of this lighter shade. This would be shell, and then you can see some reds, and this is a red limestone that is placed in the border and that it's used in the chariots. In the second register, we see a row of what appear to be soldiers. And why do I say these appear to be soldiers? Because they're all wearing the same thing. So this would indicate that this is some kind of uniform. It looks like some kind of helmet or headdress and some kind of perhaps animal skin cape. And they appear to be holding weapons. And then we will see in front of them is a row of what appear to be war captives. So these are enemies that have been captured. They appear to have been stripped of their clothing, which indicates that captured status. And then in the top register, remember the register is this area that's delineated with lines, we see one large figure in the center. This is an example of hierarchy of scale. Remember, the largest individual will be considered the most important in terms of the social hierarchy at the time. So this would be the king or the ruler. And we can see the soldiers behind the ruler, and we can see soldiers presenting these war captives to the king. So basically they're saying, we've won the war, here's our soldiers, here's the chariots, here's all of the war captives. This is a depiction of Sumerian victory. Now, if we look at the opposite side, we see the peace side. Again, we'll start on the bottom and read from the bottom up. In the bottom register, we see what look like individuals carrying big packs or bales of some kind of food stuff, perhaps bags of grain, something like this. They're bringing some kind of materials wrapped up in a bag. They're also leading animals. And we see this happening also in the second register. These people are leading animals perhaps to the slaughter, perhaps an offering to the king. If these are the spoils of war, then all of this really belongs to the king anyway. So they have brought food and animals that they have pillaged after defeating the enemy. And in the top row, you can see a depiction of a great Sumerian feast, a festival celebrating the end of war, and they are enjoying the spoils of war. Again, we see hierarchy of scale. The largest figure seated over to the left is the king. He's seated on a throne and he's surrounded by attendants. And then there are some figures facing the king, perhaps other nobles, his council, representative governors, and they are enjoying this feast that's celebrating their recent victory over their enemies. You can also see a little detail that I love, which is this individual on the right side who appears to be playing some kind of musical instrument. This is a lyre. It's sort of akin to a modern day harp. And one of the really interesting things about this is that we have an actual harp from this same cemetery. So here we see the bull-headed harp. This is carved in wood. And then we see the application of gold, lapis lazuli, red limestone, and shell, which are the same materials that are used in the Standard of Ur. This is from tomb 800 from the Royal Cemetery at Ur, and it's dated to about 2600 to 2400 BCE. So this is an example of this kind of musical instrument, this harp or lyre that would have been played at the feast. It's like art inception, like we have the object that's depicted in the other object. In both cases, with the Standard of Ur and with this bull-headed harp, we see really, again, this economy based on trade of precious materials with other civilizations. So these are status symbols because they come from faraway places, which makes them more exotic and definitely more expensive. These elevate the status to luxury materials, which makes sense because, of course, the king and the royals would want luxury materials in their tombs. Looking back to the peace side, we can see, and like peace is an interesting term because this is a peace that has been gained through warfare, and they're enjoying the spoils of war, the loot, the booty, and it's kind of interesting that this object is now, in much the same way, a spoil of war, and it's in the British Museum in London. Now, if you look closely, you can see different kinds of animals. We can get an idea of what kind of animals they were raising in the region, what kind of crops they might have been growing, and we get a little sense of the clothing and the other kind of daily instruments that we might find in a Sumerian king's home. When we look at the style in both the Standard of Ur and we can look closely at the imagery on the bull harp, we can see it's a very abstracted style. We see a very angular depiction of some kind of soft textures. Let's look at a close-up here of the bull. You can see the bull has this kind of beard with a very stylized design on it. And you can see that the gold and the shell and the different materials really contrast well together and create a unified color palette. And we close with a little sound of what this ancient Sumerian bull-headed harp would have sounded like. As always, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe to arttrippin. Follow arttrippin on TikTok and arttrippin with Prof D on Instagram. And I'm Dr. Megan Lorraine Debin, and this is arttrippin, the lecture series.